Welcome to the Safe Harbor Shining the Light podcast, where we will shine the light on community issues such as substance use disorder, poverty, homelessness, and the stigma that prevents many from getting the help that they need. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoy this episode.
Hi, welcome to Safe Harbor Shining the Light podcast. I'm Sarah Blanton, Director of Development for Safe Harbor, and today I'm excited to welcome our guest, Chris Johnson. Chris joined us on our last episode as we talked about mental health and homelessness, and so Chris, thank you for coming back.
Thank you.
Because I feel like we only got to touch a little bit on your story, and there's so many things about your story that I feel will resonate well with a lot of our viewers, that will provide hope, that will kind of shift perceptions, all the things that we want to do with this podcast.
First I want to thank Safe Harbor and you, Sarah, for inviting me to share my story. So I want to go ahead and start back to like when I was 11, 12 years old, living in Detroit. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, until I was about 11 and 12. And in Detroit is pretty rough. The environment, the unemployment rate is, very high, at that time. So it's 1968, 1967. Riots were going on. It was just a lot of turmoil, and I wanted to get out of Detroit. My grandmother lived in Kings Mountain, so I remember coming to Kings Mountain for the summer to live with her. Walking down the street, people are speaking to me, and and everybody was just so kind, and I was like, wow, I kind of like this, and I wanted to stay. So I ended up asking my grandmother, could I stay, and she said yes. So and I started going to North Elementary School in Kings Mountain in sixth grade. So from that point on, I started going, I was a baseball player. And it was kind of ironic, because I got a football scholarship at Gardner-Webb, but in Kings Mountain, no African-American kids played baseball. Mm-hmm. So it was very strange for me to want to play baseball, but I was the only African-American kid on the team. And but I loved the game so much, I didn't really see color. I was just, playing the game, and all my friends were basketball and football players. And so I remember playing Little League baseball, winning MVP on the baseball team in Little League, and then moving up to middle school, and we won a championship in middle school. So athletics played a very important part, in my life, because, growing up without a father, didn't have a father. But it was 11 of us living in a 2-bedroom house in Kings Mountain. So we were a blended family, but we were very close. And you couldn't tell us that we were poor, because as far as we knew, we had everything we needed. Life was good. But then when I got a little older, became, a teenager in high school, I started seeing all my other friends with their dad. And that had an impact on me, because I wanted that. I was very envious of all the guys that had dads in their lives. And so I kind of gravitated to the coaches to be my father figures. And that's how I kind of got really entrenched in athletics. So I went on to Kings Mountain High School, and I graduated. I played 3 sports, football, basketball, and baseball. And I was the first person in the history of the school to win Most Valuable Player 2 years in a row in football. Really? So I realized football was my strength. Mm-hmm. And then I got that football scholarship to go to Gardner-Webb University in 1976. So I went on to Gardner-Webb, and and I'm playing football, but I'm an All-American hometown boy who did no drugs. I didn't do no drugs, alcohol in high school. Mm-hmm. I was just really, my body was a temple. I was an athlete. And then around about my late sophomore, early junior year, I remember football practice. These guys were smoking weed in the locker room, and it kind of smelled good. And I, me being curious, I went over there, and they say, Johnson, hit this. It'll make you run faster and jump higher. And I'm like, okay. So I hit it, the marijuana, and then I went to practice. Now, remind you, I'm one of the fastest guys on the team. But on this particular day, I was the slowest. I was very uncoordinated, and the coach noticed it. And he came down out of the bleachers, and he got in my face, and he grabbed me by my face mask. He said, "Johnson, are you on drugs?" And I'm shaking, and I'm thinking, oh, God, I'm going to lose my scholarship. But he did not. He didn't take my scholarship, but he pushed me away. I think he kind of knew something was wrong with me. So I never got high at practice again. But I did continue, getting high with my friends and, recreationally smoking every now and then and drinking on the weekend. And that's how it kind of got started. Drugs and alcohol got started for me.
It puts me in mind of the prevention progression that you and I talk about, the trial.
Yep.
And
that
the
was the
T
trial
stands
stage.
for the trial.
Yep.
And then that R is the recreational use.
Yeah. I was there. I was right in that, in those stages. And so in my junior year also, my girlfriend got pregnant. And so we had a son. Here I am, a junior in college with a baby, and I thought I was going to have to leave college and go to work. But I had, a conversation with my girlfriend's mother, and we decided the best thing for me and the child was for me to finish college. So they helped me to continue my career. And so I got, this son as I move on through college, and I graduate in 1980. And I started substituting at Kingsbound High School. So I'm substituting at the school where I went to high school at. And I just thought that was great. And so I eventually go off to get my first teaching job in Wilkes County, Wilkes Central High School. I was a football coach, baseball coach, and basketball coach. I was assistant in all those, but that's where I started. And so I stayed there, about 3 years, and at some point, I left there after 3 years, and I go to Gastonia. Couldn't get a job in teaching, but I'm still using drugs and alcohol at the time. And so I ended up getting a job at Southwest Middle School. No, it was junior high at the time, so it's middle school now. But I got a job there, and I'm teaching, and coaching football, basketball, and girls track. And so, as time moved on, I could feel my use of drugs becoming more progressive.
I was going to ask you was there an awareness or was there a point where you were like, this is, I've taken it to another level.
Yeah, and I remember the first time when I realized I had a problem. Well, I got married fresh out of college. It didn't last long, but I got married, and me and my wife were living in Wilkesboro. She was a nurse, and she went in my drawer and found some weed that I had in my drawer and flushed it down the toilet. Well, I went ballistic. I mean, I was looking at, like this was money to me, and and I'm addicted to it. So we had this big argument. And I was like, God, you were arguing over that with her, It must have been a big deal for you at that time. So that was one of the first things. Then I started getting high by myself. I didn't need my friends on the weekend no more. So I'm going out getting my own stuff, bringing it back home, and I'm smoking it, and then I'm drinking. So I started doing things on my own instead of. So now I'm not a recreational user anymore. Because I'm not doing it with friends. So, and that was one of the stages. And then at some point, when my son got to be around about 14 years old, it was a tragic event in my life. He was 14 years old. One day he was standing outside waiting on the bus to come, and one of his friends who I despised came and showed him a new gun that he had just purchased. And so when he did that, my son had about maybe 10 to 15 seconds to make a decision of whether he was going to hang out with his buddy or go to school. Never skipped school in his life. Was an AB student, very good athlete, just a phenomenal young man. But on this particular day, he was curious, and he played hooky from school. He skipped school. And so we know when at some point they went back to the house and everybody's gone to work, everybody's gone to school, and they start playing with the gun and emptying bullets out. We found a couple of bullets in the carpet in the front room. And at some point, he asked my son to go down the street with him to the big-time drug dealer's house. With all these guys, most of them had dropped out of school. They're 18. My son's, just a 14-year-old kid. The guy who got him out of the bus line was 18 years old. So there was an age difference. But still, he went with this young man. And when they went into this kitchen where all these guys were sitting around smoking weed and drinking beer, one kid grabs the gun and pours all the bullets out on the table, then grabs one bullet and puts it in his mouth and puts it in the barrel and spins the barrel and puts it up to the person beside him and pulls the trigger, and it didn't go off. Everybody starts laughing. And then the other kid grabs a gun. He spins the barrel and he clicks it, and it didn't go off. And so the other kid looks over in the corner and asks my son, he says, "Hey, you going to hang with the big dogs, man. You got to get over here at the table." And my son was like, "Nah, I don't want to do that because I'm just here with him." Mm-hmm. And they say, "Well, are you?" And they called him the B word. It rhymes with witch. I don't use profanity, but you can about figure what it was. Mm-hmm. But there's something about that word that caused my son to rise up out of that chair and walk over to this table and said, "I'm not that. I'm not that." And then he sat down and he's trying to, convince these guys that he's not that. And the guy that got him out of the line grabs the gun and pulls spins the barrel and puts it up to his side and pulls the trigger, and bam, the gun goes off. And it scares everybody in the kitchen. They all go running out into the yard. One kid regains his composure, goes back into the kitchen, and finds my son convulsing on the floor. And so he dials 911, and the ambulance comes and picks him up and takes him to the hospital in Kings Mountain. I'm teaching school at Southwest Junior High at the time, and we're loading up the bus, getting ready to go to our first football game, and the secretary from the school comes running out and stops the bus before we leave. She says, "Mr. Johnson, you got a call from the emergency room." So I go in, and I can remember just as plain as day. This was 1992. I remember the lady on the phone said, "Mr. Johnson, your son's been shot. You need to come to the emergency room right now." And so I said, "Ma'am, is he okay? Where's he been shot at?" And she wouldn't tell me. And I was a little frustrated because she wasn't giving that information. And now I'm looking back, and I realize they don't give you information like that over the phone because they don't want you to be distraught going down the highway so you can kill someone else. So I ended up leaving the hospital, driving to Kings Mountain, leaving the junior high, driving to the hospital to check on my son. And when I get there, I noticed there are 3 helicopters flying around, and then the parking lot is full of people. I mean, because Kings Mountain High School is very close to the hospital. It was the end of the day. All the kids and teachers had rushed down to the emergency room to check on him because he was a very popular kid as well. And then when I get there, I'm walking through the crowd, and the crowd's partying, and I see his grandmother come out of the hospital door, emergency room door, and she's walking through the crowd, and she's looking at me, and I'm looking at her, and we're looking at each other, and she's got this look on her face. I'm like, no, I knew it was detrimental, but I didn't know to what extent. Then we get about this close, and we're face to face. She looks me in the eye. She says, "Corey's gone." And I said, "What?" She says, "Your son is dead." And that was just kind of really devastating for me because it hit me like a ton of bricks. Everybody, we used to always say, "Boy, I know that's your son. You look like you spit him out," because he looked just like me. And I was looking for him to come to high school and break all my records and everything. But then the doctor comes out and he says, "Where are the parents at?" And I raised my hand and said, "Do you want to see your child one more time?" And he guides me through the hospital, and I go to this room, and he pulls the curtain back, and there is my boy, laying on a steel slab. Looked like he was asleep. And I just grabbed him, and I just held him. I held on to him, and I'm hugging him, and I'm asking him a question. I said, "What did you do? What did you do?" Not realizing he couldn't respond to me at the time. Mm-hmm. So that was just a really devastating time for me. And I originally thought he had drugs in his system to allow somebody to do that to him, but Come to find out when the toxicology report came back, he was clean.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I was like, what happened to make you get up out of your seat and come over to a table and let somebody put a gun up to you and pull the trigger? And that's when I found out that peer pressure is more powerful than any drug you can put in your body for young folk.
It is.
It'll make you do things that you never thought that you would do, just so you can be down or belong to a certain group of folk. And that's what he did. He wanted to be down with these older guys, and he allowed himself to be vulnerable because he wasn't taught like that. But that's what our young folk do when they get to be a certain time in their lives.
I know. That's just, I think it's an important message for, families to just hear and remind that, again, I think from birth, we all have this longing for acceptance and belonging.
Yeah.
And it's such a strong force that gets a hold of our youth, and that I am sure that altered the course of your life in many ways. So, how did it alter the course of your life?
Yeah, it altered big time. Remember, I was this recreational user of marijuana and alcohol, and when that happened, I went into a state of depression. And I started drinking more, smoking more weed, just, trying to medicate myself 'cause I didn't really want to feel that grief. And I remember being over a guy's house, and one of the guys they were in the room doing cocaine, and one of the guys comes in the room and he says, "Man, here, hit this. It'll make you feel better. Your son just died. I know you hurt, man. Hit this." And he had a crack pipe. And it was cocaine. And so I hit it. I said, what else, can happen to me? I done lost my son, and I became instantly addicted that quick. And now I not only am grieving from my son's death, but also got this craving that I have for cocaine now and alcohol and weed. So, and it began to consume my life. And I began to do more and more. And the next thing I knew, I found myself not coming home at night. I'm out in the street trying to find this drug all night long, just trying to have something else to medicate me and keep me from feeling what I really needed to deal with. And so I stopped showing up for work. Now, I'm a school teacher. I stopped showing up for work. I didn't have a substitute. I mean, people were looking for me, couldn't find me. My life was spiraling out of control, and it did. And eventually, I lost everything. My family, my job, and I just packed everything up and put it in my truck and just started living in my car on the street. And then I originally found another teaching job in Charlotte at the alternative school. So I'm living in my car. Nobody knew. I was living in my car, going to work every day, because the custodian would open the door in the morning. I would go in and wash up in the sink and just put on this facade like nobody knew. But I was drinking like a 40-ounce before I went to school. And I remember a teacher walked up to me trying to give me a peppermint because she could smell alcohol on me. And, that's the way addicts are. We're the last one to notice. Other people already know that you're addicted. You thinking nobody knows. But people around you know. Those who are close to you, they know. And so eventually I started hanging with some very shady folk, because one thing I learned about drugs and alcohol, it'll take you places you never thought you would go. You'll spend a little bit more money than you intended on spending, and you may not make it back. Some of us have and some of us have not. So I began to live this life of living on the streets and hanging out with drug dealers and doing drugs and things like that. And so I ended up one day getting jumped on by a bunch of guys, and they beat me so bad. One eye broke the socket in my eye, and I couldn't see out of this eye, and had cuts all over my face. And I tried to go to school the next day, and the principal pulls me in the office and says, "You can't come in here looking like that." I mean, I was really a mess. So I had to go to the doctor and get my eye, surgery on my eye and all this stuff. And the whole time I'm thinking, I'm okay. I'm still in control. But I'm living in my car, and all of a sudden, the motor in my car blows up. it just stops working, and I'm homeless now because I don't have anywhere to live. So I'm walking around the streets and sleeping in abandoned houses and all these things. I don't have a job anymore now because I've lost another job. So I'm homeless. Now I'm in and out of the shelter in Gastonia. And that's when I really learned the things that were etched in my life that helped me make it through. One, spirituality was a big part of my homelessness and keeping me afloat when everyone else had turned their back on me. My family, they didn't want me coming around. And that's what you call tough love. I was an addict. I was living on the street. And addicts have certain stereotypes, stereotypical things that people think about you. I remember going over my aunt's house one time, and we're having a good time. It's Thanksgiving, and her watch got missing. Well, she says, "Chris, give me my watch." I said, "I don't have your watch." And that's one thing I would never do, was steal from my family. But she asked me to leave because she thought I had stolen her watch. And that hurt me so bad because she was that last one who really believed in me. And when she did that, it hurt. Seen her 2 weeks later. She told me she found a watch in a dirty clothes hamper in the bathroom. And I was like, golly. It's like when someone shoots you, say, "Oh, excuse me, I didn't mean to shoot you." They can apologize, but the pain was still there. And that pain is, if I can recall it, it still hurts the time when I think about it now. But that was how my family looked at me when I'm an addict on the street. But the one thing I do remember is a lot of people would tell me, "You don't belong out here. Why are you out here on these streets? You're not like everybody else." And in my mind, I kept thinking, I'm an addict like everybody else. But I guess I didn't carry myself like other people did. But yet I was still homeless on these streets.
Was there because there was a foundation there with your grandmother and your family in reference to your spirituality. Did you have an internal conflict? Because that double life, it gets exhausting.
Yeah, and I'll tell you that foundation that my grandmother instilled in me, because she made us go to church constantly. Every Sunday we went to church. And so when I got so down and out, I would find a way to go to a church. I was dirty and would sit in the back, and I would always watch how people greeted you. And I'm homeless. How do you greet a homeless person when they come in your church? Because one or two things, you're either going to be, get out of here, stinky, get out of here. Or you're going to greet them and make them feel home. And then they'll come on in and you can do more things with them. That's how I know how to be respectful to homeless people, because they crave that more than anything else. They can't help the situation at the time, but I just want to be treated normal just like everybody else. But we don't do that as humans because we judge people, especially the way you look. And so I would go in these churches and get clothing, get food, whatever. I knew the church was my safe haven. And so one time, eventually I got to the point where I was tired of living like this. And so I contemplated suicide. And in my mind, I was like, wow, if I can just take my life, all the pain will be gone. My family won't be embarrassed anymore. All these people that are disappointed in me won't have to worry about that no more. I won't be hurting or in pain. So I devised a plan to jump off a bridge and let a transfer truck hit me. I had walked the route, looked at the bridge, looked at the trucks coming underneath the bridge. I mean, I had everything planned. And on this particular night, I decided to carry my plan out. So I'm walking to the bridge. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. I think it was February the 27th, 2003. So I'm walking, and something just tells me, well, what if that truck hits you and you don't die? Somebody has to know where your body is. So I stopped at a payphone and called 911 and said, hey, I'm getting ready to do this. My body's going to be over here. If y'all want to know where I'm at, and the lady was like, sir, you don't want to do that. And I kept talking to her and telling her, hey, yes, I do. I already got a plan. And so she had dispatched a police officer to come to that telephone booth. I didn't know it.
I'm smiling because this is so tragic that this is, again, you're my friend.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to hear you talk about this, but it's just, you had this plan, and it's just like God was like, nope, nope.
And it's crazy because when it all played out, it was like God and Satan were playing a game of chess. And Satan looked at God and said, checkmate, I got him. He belongs to me. And then all of a sudden, the police officer pulls up, the ambulance pulls up, and it's got 2 other people in it. And I got 3 people at this phone booth talking me out of committing suicide, and the lady on the phone. Wow. And there was so many people talking to me at the time, and I'm like, I surrender. That was when I surrendered, and I said, hey, just take me wherever you're going to take me. And I think, and I know God looked at Satan, he said, checkmate, I got him. He belongs to me. And God took over my life at that particular time. I went to Broughton. Well, first I went to Gaston Memorial Hospital, and they put me on the 7th floor. And I'm on the 7th floor, and I'm on suicide watch. So you have to have a nurse in the room with you constantly at all the time. And this lady had a Jamaican accent. So I'll never forget, she talked to me all night long. And just looking back on hindsight, I went back to the hospital after I was about a year clean, asked about that lady, and they told me that they never had a nurse with a Jamaican accent. So I was like, you got to be kidding me. I know this lady. She sat with me all night long. And so that was my first experience realizing that God was with me the whole time, and I didn't even know it. I'm thinking I'm going through this all on my own. So I ended up going to Broughton after that. In the middle of the night, the sheriff comes and gets me, puts me in handcuffs, and takes me and puts me in the car. I was so ashamed. I said, can I put a towel over my arms when I walked through the hospital? Because I had handcuffs on. And so he takes me to Broughton, and I'm in Broughton, and I'm in this hospital where we as kids used to always pick at these people being in Broughton because we thought they were crazy. But here I am, had a mental problem, and they put me in this hospital. So I realized that them people, they weren't no more different than I was. They were just going through something.
Right.
And so now I'm in this hospital with these other people, and they would line us up every morning to take these pills. And these pills, I don't know what they were, but they were pretty strong because I felt like I was walking around like a zombie all day long. But I wanted my life back. So instead of taking the pills, I put them underneath my tongue, spit them out after about 2 or 3 days because I wanted to talk to the nurse because I couldn't talk to her when I took those pills. And she came by and I said, ma'am, I want to get out of here and I want to change my life. She says, really? And so they backed the pills that I was taking. They stopped giving them to me. And so I came back to myself. And I could walk around, I could talk to people, and I started feeling, more positive about life. And I became one of the model patients. I was helping out with all the other residents. And then they said, well, we got a bed space at Black Mountain, Julian F. Keith Alcohol and Drug Treatment Center. And so I said, I'd been there for 3 weeks, and they said, okay, now we're going to send you here. See, God was in control. I had nowhere else to go. I'm homeless. So I just followed his lead, and then I ended up going to Black Mountain for 23 days. This was a 28-day program. I stayed there 23 days. I had to go back to court in Gastonia for a probation violation. But I became a model student at Black Mountain. It was a very awesome place for me. So now I got about almost 2-3 months clean time underneath my belt. And I wanted to live. I wanted to live now.
What do you attribute to just that desire to live? When you talk about being in the situation in an institution like Broughton and Black Mountain, and you've got people to your right and your left. You're there for similar reasons, but everybody has their own story. But for you, what was that motivating, that intrinsic motivation for you? So
it was 2 things. One was my children. I wanted to be a father again so bad. But I couldn't be a father if I was an addict, if I was addicted to something on the street and I couldn't control myself, because moms wouldn't want me coming around the children if I was not in my right mind. And then another thing was my spirituality. I mean, it was just, I knew that God was in control. When I surrendered and I gave everything to God, He took over. And He started taking me and putting people in my life and placing me here and placing me there. And I remember being there, it was about time for me to leave, and these people from Exodus homes came and spoke to the congregation, the people at Black Mountain. And I said, I want to go there. And so I filled an application out, and I was talking to one of the ladies, and she went back and told Reverend Longcry about me. And so they accepted my application. And so when I got out, it's crazy because when I got out, instead of going to Exodus, I went to Gastonia. That was my old stomping ground. I got 3 months clean. I went to the old neighborhood. I'm bragging about, how clean I am and stuff like that. And somebody said, here. And he offered me drugs. And I'm like, what? And I thought about it, and I hit it. But when I hit it that one time, I got scared, and I put it down, and I ran as fast as I could back to the Salvation Army in Gastonia, because that was my safe haven in Gastonia. And I thought I was going to get trapped again on the street. And so the next day I go to this church, the church where I had been going off and on, and I said, hey, I need help. Can y'all help me get to Hickory? And they gave me a one-way ticket to Hickory on a bus. And that's how I got to Hickory. Now, when I got to Exodus, they give you a drug test. And I'm thinking, I hit that thing one time, I was going to be able to pass the drug test when I got there, because everybody was waiting to get this phenomenal guy. They heard so much about, all the good things I had done at Black Mountain and in Morganton, at Broughton. So I took the drug test and I failed it. And my God, here I am back on the street again, because I had to go to the Salvation Army in Hickory. Didn't know nobody. I woke up that next morning and I walked back to Exodus and I sat on the steps. And everybody was like, what you doing up here? You don't belong up here. You dirty. You can't pass a drug test. And I said, well, I ain't going to them streets. I'm going to sit right here till I can pass that drug test. I want to get in this program. And they didn't believe me. And I walked back to Salvation Army. Next morning, I walked right back to Exodus. I did that for 11 days.
Wow.
On the 11th day, Reverend Longcry walked out there. He said, you ready? I said, yes, sir. And he said, well, come on in, take this drug test. I took the test and I passed it. And the rest is history, because when I got in that program, I was so hungry. I wanted my life back so bad. And I guess God had to send me through that little time back to the shelter for a reality check, because I could have just, I could have been on the streets here in Hickory, doing my thing. But that ain't what I wanted. Well,
I'm glad that you brought that up, because overconfidence.
Oh, yeah.
In the recovery field, that is something that we spend a lot of time creating a plan around, because it's so empowering to enter in a life of recovery. But there's another reality check that has to happen, that your life has to change completely. Yeah. You can't go back.
You're right.
And thrive in that environment that took you down.
Yeah.
And so God clearly has had His hand in all of that.
And I realized that He was cleaning me up and preparing me for something, but I couldn't see it at the time. So I'm in this program, and I'm a PE teacher, and I ain't tell nobody I was a PE teacher because I didn't want nobody to know. I was embarrassed. But then one day they had a field day at the church, and they had bought all these toys for the kids. And I asked Reverend Longcry, could I do the field day for the kids? He said, sure. So here I am, a PE teacher, and now I got all this stuff. And I had that parking lot laid out. I had badminton, volleyball, softball, basketball, everything laid out, jump ropes. And this lady walks up to me and says, how'd you know how to set all this stuff up like this? I said, ma'am, I'm a PE teacher. She says, really, why you ain't tell nobody? I said, I was ashamed. She says, we got to get you back in the school system so you can start doing your thing. And see, that's what Exodus does. Yeah. They find out what your specialty is, and when you clean yourself up enough where you can step into the real world and continue their reputation of doing good things, they push you out there. Yeah. So I started going back into the school, doing substance abuse prevention. Mm-hmm. And so I'm
the cognitive connection.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Through cognitive connection. Mm-hmm. And so I'm doing that. And, then I met you.
Yes.
And so
another life-altering moment.
Another life-altering moment. And Steve, God kept putting these people in my life. Right. But then he also had me to realize that these kids was walking around in the middle of the day in this neighborhood with nothing to do, pants sagging and stuff. And I'm looking around like, was there not anything for these kids to do? And so I started going back to my room at night, and I would pray. And like God would just speak to me, and he would just start giving me this curriculum. And I just started writing stuff down on paper. And next thing I know, I had a whole curriculum in about a month's time. He had given me a whole curriculum. It was Young Men of Integrity. Wow. And I took it, I'll never forget, I took it to someone, and they told me, they said, we ain't ready for this. And so they discarded it. I'm like, oh, God. I know God gave me this, to give to somebody. And so, and I kept giving my testimony in church, and there was a blind man who was in the church at the time. His name was Larry Pope. He told somebody for me to come and see him after church. So I go see him, and he tells me, take your program down there to Hickory Public Housing, see Alonda Jackson, and she'll work with you. I took it down there, and I showed Miss Alonda. And she said, well, how much you going to charge me for this program? I said, well, I ain't got no budget. She says, well, how you going to do a program? You ain't got no budget. I said, well, I didn't know I needed a budget. So this lady helped me write a budget for this program and allowed me to do the program in Hickory Public Housing. And the rest was history. It took off like wildfire. Yeah. Started out with 6. The next week, I had 10. The next week I had 15, and then after about a month, I'm going to take a picture of all the kids in the neighborhood so I could put it on the front of a brochure, and I had 29 kids show up. Wow. And I was like, wow. And that's when I got nervous, because I'm thinking, oh, this is getting too big. And I didn't even have a nonprofit at the time. But the need was so great for a mentor in the community, especially at that time. I remember doing an activity with the kids, and I asked them, I said, how many of you guys have fathers in your lives? 2 kids of about 20 raised their hands. And I had to step away, and I walked out of the room, and I'm like, my God, what have I got myself into? Because now I know what my purpose is. It's to be a father figure and a mentor to these kids out here who don't have the kind of guidance that they need in order to be a healthy adult. So I'm going through this program, and all of a sudden I run into these gentlemen in the community, Earl Fincher and Eddie Broussard, those 2 guys, and they say, we don't help you get your own nonprofit. I'm like, what? I said, yeah, just let us help you. Susan Smith from Exodus Home, she was involved in it. So these people helped me get my own nonprofit. And once I got that nonprofit, I was able to get funding to help me do my program. And then I got a call from Glenn Barger, who was a superintendent for Catawba County Schools. And he said, are you Chris Johnson? I said, yes. He said, you that street walker. I said, what? He had already had a nickname for me. He said, you don't want to be walking the streets helping all these kids. I said, well, I guess I am street walker. He says, well, we need you to come work for Catawba County Schools because we get ready to start an alternative program. And I said, well, sir, I filled an application out about 2 or 3 months ago, and y'all didn't call me. Hickory Public Schools wouldn't hire me. Newton Conover, no one would hire me because, my past. But here, God gives me this program, Young Men of Integrity, who caught the attention of the area school system, and they brought me back in as a alternative school coordinator. And so I was there for 2 years, and they said, well, in order to keep your job, you got to get a master's degree. So I started applying for master's program, and I got turned down at Appalachian State. I got turned down at Gardner-Webb, and I was sitting on the side of the bed crying. I'm like, this ain't going to happen. I can't do it. I can't get back in there. I mean, I graduated college in 1980. So I wrote a letter to Appalachian State because I had failed the entry test. And I said, listen, if you allow me to get in on probation, I will represent you, and I will do the best job I can to represent Appalachian State. And I didn't think nothing else about it. And about a month later, I get a letter back. Mr. Johnson, congratulations. Wow. You're into our master's program. And I'm like, God, and God, he was doing all this stuff just so I could help these people.
But I've heard a few times throughout your story about how you've used your voice. You've advocated, and you haven't given up, and you've also been vulnerable. There was nothing that you hid about your past, just being completely transparent. Mm-hmm. And I just think that that's a very powerful message that people that are in recovery need to hear. Mm-hmm. And I just think that's so amazing.
Yeah. And, and I'm glad you said that, because there were times when I was ashamed to tell people that I was an addict, because all they could see was this man that came to school every day in a suit and a tie. And so I'm like, wow, I got this addict, I'm addict. I'm not addict anymore. And when I would go to my meetings on Monday night, my recovery meetings, you had to address yourself. Mm-hmm. I'm Chris, I'm an addict. And you can't go in there and say, you somebody, you're not, because once an addict, always an addict. And it's so true, because I have this saying when I would do my programs was, if a cucumber became a pickle, could it go back to being a cucumber? And the kids would look at me like, what? Yeah, if a cucumber became a pickle, could it go back to being a cucumber? And if you're an addict, you can't go back to living a normal life. You just can't, because you're an addict, and you always will be one. You might be a recovering addict, but you're still an addict. So you have to live life accordingly. That will preserve your recovery, and not allow you to go back into that old lifestyle, because the people change, the game don't never change. Yeah,
and I think it's there's a misconception around that. Mm-hmm. Why do people still associate themselves like, you're in recovery? God has brought healing into your life. Why do you keep labeling mm-hmm. yourself in that way? But I have found, just in my conversations with people, the humility. It keeps the humility, and it's not. It's just that place we talked about, the overconfidence mm-hmm. that can come. You want to remember, like you're saying, mm-hmm. my life is different, and every day I have to renew my commitment to this new life that I have. Right. And so for people listening that might be like, well, I don't feel that way, and I don't introduce myself. I feel like there needs to be a respect mm-hmm. for people to, we don't need to label other people, but they can introduce themselves in a meeting in whatever way that they need to introduce mm-hmm. themselves mm-hmm. as, whatever their journey has led them to. And if that piece of it keeps them in a place of humility, mm-hmm. I say just let them, let them do that.
And I like that, because I think that recovering addicts, we're like a fraternity or sorority. You might see somebody who looks, real normal. They're successful in their professional career and everything, but they're in recovery. You don't know nothing mm-hmm. about it until they expose it to you. Right. And when they do, you always get somebody come up to me and pull me. I would have teachers. And here I am, a principal, telling folk, I'm a recovering addict. And some of my teachers would come in my office, one at a time, individually, would close that door and said, Mr. Johnson, I'm struggling too.
Wow.
And I'm so thankful that you're out in the open, letting folk know, that you can make it.
Well, carrying that
Yeah.
message squashes that shame.
It does.
And I just believe, at Safe Harbor, when we work with the women, I mean, God, He does not want people to remain in that shame.
Right.
And for people coming forward and sharing their story of hope and sharing what God has done in their life, it just opens the door for people that have just been held and are suffering in silence because of that shame. And so thank you for your willingness to share. And that's just, again, that was confirming for you, I'm sure, as those teachers are like, I'm struggling. It's like, this is your purpose, Chris.
Yeah.
Just launch out, and you have.
Well,
you have.
I have, and it has carried me a long way. And I've had parents come to me, with kids. And I'm gonna tell you, one of the things about being an addict and being an administrator, it was a blessing and a curse. I could walk down the hallway and I could look at this kid's eyes and I could tell whether they were high or not. And it was, do I say something or do I not? Or I could walk around here like the drug police and, pulling everybody. But the one thing I decided to do was, if I saw someone going over the deep end and they started to change, I would pull them. And I'd say, hey, what's going on with you? You okay? If you need to talk to somebody, you know my story. Just, come talk to me. And I had several kids that I was mentoring, individually, at school, because they were struggling with some things. And so, and even in the community, and I would see some of them even today thanking me because they couldn't beat it at the time. But later on in life, they had somebody who could hold them accountable, and at least push them and motivate them and inspire them and try to live the life that they need to live. But I've always heard that only like 3% of folk who really go into recovery really come out, and it's hard, but you can do it, but you can't do it by yourself. And that's one of the things I want to say is, you got to have somebody walking that walk with you. And I know that they'll give you NA and AA and all these other kind of books, but there was one book that helped me more than anything, and that was the Bible. I clung to it. And my spirituality, along with NA and AA, really helped me, to pull my life together. But I always had to keep God first, and He'll just keep sending folk to you in your life and putting you in places where you need to be so you continue to do the right thing, So I would just tell, in recovery, get that spiritual awakening. Try to find someone who thinks like-minded like you, and continue hanging around good folk, folk that's doing the right thing. And you can make it,
And surrounding yourself with people that cause you to want to level up, that are going to recognize the signs and lovingly hold you accountable.
Right.
This, for programs like Exodus, Safe Harbor, the benefit of that long-term residential programming and just having that community of support. You turn around the corner, there's somebody there.
Right. You're right.
That is in your corner. And it's just so needed. Again, we crave that connection and that community. And being a part of a movement. Recovery should be celebrated.
Oh, yeah.
It hurts my heart for so many people to suffer in silence and want to pull the door closed and say,
Right.
I have a story of addiction. Let's celebrate the story of recovery.
Right.
What has recovery given you, Chris?
It gave me my life back. It gave me my self-esteem. It also allowed me to meet and experience some really great people who had that same struggle that I was having, and motivate and inspire other folk. Because they say the only way to keep it is to give it away. You got to give the knowledge and wisdom that you learn through recovery back to other folk. Pull somebody else up after you make it. That's the key part of recovery. Continue helping other folk to get on their feet and get their life back together. So, I love doing what I'm doing, just interacting with folk. I work for the city of Hickory now in the Parks and Recreation. I'm still around young people, helping, guide and direct them, into becoming healthy, successful, productive citizens in society. It was always my philosophy. Everybody ain't going to college, but everybody is going to be a citizen in society. Mm-hmm. And you got to have a skill set in order to do that. And you need help, And so there are people like me along the way who help, young folk to develop those specific skills that they need.
Mm-hmm. So present day, you're remarried.
Yes.
You're a retired assistant principal.
Yeah.
You're a retired founder of now Young People of Integrity.
Yeah.
So you moved from just having boys to including boys and young ladies.
Girls. Yeah.
In your mentoring group. Mm-hmm. And you also have a day. Folks, did you know there is the Chris Johnson Day on June the 10th?
Yeah.
And you have a key to the city to acknowledge the incredible impact that you've made in this community. So many kids, so many parents, if you think about, the parents that have also been impacted through their children. There's kids in colleges that have careers that may never have gotten to that place without your guidance. And so it's a well-deserved day, that June 10th. How shall we celebrate Chris Johnson Day?
Well, the only thing I know is just go out and just give back. Give back to those who are less fortunate than us. But only that, have fun. I mean, I'm retired, and my father-in-law used to always say, "What are you doing, Pop? This is you retire." He say, "Whatever I want to do." So whatever you want to do, when you retire, do what you want to do, and do something that you love to do. Work with young folk. That's what I do.
Volunteer Safe Harbor. That's a great option.
I love Safe Harbor. Love Exodus. Love my family. I got a little one, a little 8-year-old.
Remarried. Beautiful.
Yeah, remarried. My wife Lakeisha. I have my nephew Jeremiah and Lacey, and my stepdaughter Latavia, and so I still have an opportunity to help young folk grow into be successful adults, and like being a dad. I just love being a dad, and that's always one of the things that I always wanted when I was coming out of recovery, just be a father. I have a son who's a electrical engineer.
Wow.
Graduated from East Tennessee. My daughter Sharika, works for the gas company, lives in Gastonia, and my daughter is a social worker and lives in Minnesota. So, and I got two brand new grandbabies, Olivia and Zuri, and then I have another granddaughter who is going to be in a junior, I think. Okay, if I get it wrong. Anyway, she's at Highland Tech in Gastonia.
That's wonderful.
I have a grandson in Texas. So God's been good to me.
Yes.
That's just when I thought I lost everything. Kind of like Job, and he kind of gives everything back to you.
That's right. He's in the exchange business. We don't realize that. You surrender your life, and you think that you're giving up so much, but we don't know that what he has to give to us in exchange surpasses our expectations. Yeah, in every way.
Yeah, it does. And I just think I was on the brink of suicide. And I was thinking selfish at the time. I wasn't thinking about my kids. I wasn't thinking about nothing else. I was thinking about me. And so when I got out of that mode, I could see all these things that I had. I could be motivated to live for. And that's what I live for now. I live for them, And so I'll be speaking at Mount Zion Church on Father's Day, giving the Father's Day message.
Wonderful.
So, God's been really grateful in providing opportunities for me to give back to folk the things that I've learned over the years, So I'm thankful.
Yeah. Well, happy Chris Johnson Day on June the 10th. Then
Thank
happy
you.
Father's Day
Thank
the
you.
week after.
Thank you.
And thanks for being the best kind friend.
Okay.
You're awesome, Chris
Thank
J.
you. Thank you. Thank you. You
And we
always.
thank you for listening and tuning into this podcast. Join me in praying for Chris in this new season of his life. And be sure to follow Safe Harbor on social media, safeharbor.nc.org. You can get more information on our prior episodes. And please be sure to rate and comment on our podcast and share them with others. And we appreciate you.